Next we have Leticia Urieta, proud Tejana writer from Austin, Texas. She works as a teaching artist in the Austin community, a graduate of Agnes Scott College, and holds an MFA in fiction from Texas State. Her work appears or is forthcoming in Cleaver, Chicon Street Poets Anthology, BorderSenses, Lumina, The Offing, and others. She has recently completed her first mixed genre collection of poetry and prose, and is currently at work completing her novel that tells the story of a Mexican soldadera caught up in the march to Texas during Texas War with me. Welcome, Leticia.
Hey all, thank you for being here. So I'm going to read from the short story from my collection Las Criaturas. It's called The Monster, and actually had the honor of giving this to my friend Anita Ana Leticia de Leon, who is a PhD student in the creative writing program at the University of Houston for Spanish creative writing. And they just started, I guess, like printing chapbooks, so this got to be printed, and that's really cool. But they only printed like 10 copies. So I'm actually giving it to my friend Sara Rafael Garcia so that she can print more. So just to give you a tiny bit of context about this story, it takes place in the point of view of a child, a little girl in an immigrant detention center. I wrote this story about 4 years ago, and I wish that it were not so relevant, but it is. So just FYI, I did burst into tears about halfway through practicing this earlier, so no promises that that won't happen again. You used to see in the newspaper signs with "illegals go home" written on them, and other more insidious messages like "English only" and "secure our borders," that seemed to say that if you were all gone, the country would return to its former greatness. Here there isn't much to read. You used to be able to bring books home by the armload from the school library. The librarian was an understanding woman, and she spoke Spanish. She showed you the books in Spanish, and when you read almost all of those, the librarian encouraged you to read new books in English that she ordered. Some books she gave you even had English and Spanish together, switching back and forth on each page like feet hopscotching from side to side, guided by the same brain. In 8th grade, you still loved the bilingual readers, but when you could read in English, a whole new world of stories opened up for you. In here, your brain stagnates like water in a dirty puddle, filming over with dirt and flies. You have to make your own stories on the playground where mommy cannot hear. Where did the monster come from? Your sister's at the top of the slide calling down to you. It's always been here. She slides down with a whoosh, feet crunching on gravel, and then running back around to get another turn before someone else comes along. We were safe before in our apartment. Why did they bring us here where the monster is? You watch your sister's brown curls sweep behind her as she goes down, her voice breathless this time. She runs back again. Well, it's when you come from somewhere else, they have to make sure you're good enough to be here. If we listen and follow the rules, then the man will come with a spell, and if the spell works, then we can leave without being fed to the monster. Can they do that? You yank her feet down and you both fall to the ground, hugging her to you. That's not going to happen to us. But that night, you dream of you both at the top of the slide, unable to stop yourselves from falling into the sharp-toothed, gaping mouth at the bottom, black eyes gleaming back. In school, the classes are divided amongst a few different teachers. You're in the upper grade class, but there are still kids of all different ages there. The class takes place part of the day in Spanish, part in English, a weird hodgepodge of reading workbooks, copying sentences, and language activities. Because you know English better than most, your teacher gives you a packet of math problems to do. They're for 6th graders, equations you've mastered 2 years ago, but you do them anyway, and then read the battered copy of A to Z mysteries that you liked back when you were first learning the language. Your teacher, a fragile-looking white woman, is sweaty, always up and moving, trying to assist each new student in a state of panic or boredom. You can't blame a teacher for not teaching when she's busy just trying to keep things from falling apart. The girl who sits next to you, a recent arrival from Honduras, finishes her work quickly and says, "I hear your English." wanting you to read the mystery book aloud, leaning her head on her hands in an expectant pose. You do, and you can almost see your own words seeping into her ears and floating up into her brain. Sometimes you sit together on the floor by the window on the cold tile so that your friend can follow along with the words. Even if they have no meaning yet, this girl sweeps her finger under each line and mumbles along. In the noisy chaos of the classroom, the only place besides the playground where kids are allowed to be loud, you go undisturbed for at least an hour. She tells you stories from Honduras, of their family, and who were left behind. La Bestia is the train we got on to get here, she says, and mimics the snaking movement of the train with her hand. Why do they call it that? It is so long, comes all the way from Honduras to Mexico. People die. You ask her to explain, but she doesn't have the words in English, and you have lost the words in Spanish to describe why people die on the way to los Estados Unidos. You've been speaking English too long. Instead, you begin to teach her words in English you think she may need to know. More, help, please, cold, sick, hurts. In return for her story, you tell her about the apartment that Dia is keeping clean for your return. In this home, your American home, Mommy prepared the meals even after working all day. Beans would bubble on the stove, and the apartment smelled like azafran, ajo, and cebolla, and the seasoned rice filled your hungry bellies after a long day at school and the bus ride home. You could smell it even after the dishes were soaking in the sink, and then the three of you would crowd together on the rented couch to watch TV. Your mommy liked watching those silly game shows on Telemundo, but switched away when the news came on. Seeing bodies lying in the street and hanging from bridges gave your sister nightmares. In the old complex in Querétaro, the three of you left behind your tios, your primos, and your abuela sharing the same house. You remember the day when none of you could walk home alone anymore, when the narcos stood on the corner of the street with guns slung across their shoulders. A boy that you knew from the neighborhood joined the gang. He was only 11. You watched him walk around with wads of cash tucked inside his jeans, refusing to talk to anyone from the vecindad, and somehow that hurt more than his arrogant swagger and how he threatened the little kids who walked by him. When you hurried past, before you started walking the long way home, he would look past you as though you hadn't shared books at school the year before. That was when Mommy decided to move you all the way north across the frontera. Mommy's sister got her a job at a Mexican restaurant making tortillas. After a day's work, they both came home smelling like maíz y harina, laughing when they walked through the door, even though their feet ached from standing all day, as if these moments made up for the years separated by fence and miles. But Tia has papers. On the way to school, Mommy was driving too fast, late to drop you off, running late for work when a policeman pulled you over. Her hand shook on the steering wheel, knowing she had no license to give the officer. He leaned through the window, staring her down, and looking at you in the front seat, your sister in the back, both strapped in, hands on your lap, quiet. And still, he had you get out and sit in the back seat of his car while he drove you to the police station. You sat with your sister on the wooden bench outside the room where they took Mommy to talk to another officer whose jacket said ICE. It was freezing sitting on the bench, and you thought that maybe the Iceman made it cold to punish people, though you couldn't think what Mommy had done wrong. You remember now that your greatest sadness was missing the 15 minutes in the morning that your teacher liked to spend reading aloud. That week, the class was reading Esperanza Rising. As you sat on the bench holding your little sister's climbing hand, you pictured the cover of the book of Esperanza flying above the fields, away from the pain of not belonging and into the cloudless sky. Tears hang off your eyelashes. Your nueva amiga wipes them away with her thumb, and the monster stays quiet for a time. Thank you.